Yeah. I grew up in New Jersey where this year the number of accidents.
Oh my God!
Power to them.
How bad did you get?
Fighting with myself next to
So there is room in an overflow room, which is next door. You'll have audio, you'll have screens. Next door overflow room is much more comfortable than standing for the next 2 hours. I recommend folks go over there. We'll wait another 30 seconds if you'd like to go over to the overflow room. And we'll get started here in just a couple of seconds.
It's like a rule.
No, I see tomorrow. We were just discussing the challenges of audio. Oh my gosh. They do not have good battery. I don't know. I'm like shocked. Yeah, they really do. It's a lot of
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get started. If I can have your attention, please. If I can have your attention. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Gorell, and I serve as a Ventura County supervisor representing the 2nd District. It's my honor to host this town hall here tonight, and we've assembled what I think is a group of panelists, subject matter experts. They're going to bring a wide variety of opinions and experience to the conversation. It could never be more important than it is right now. Merciless has been Mother Nature as it relates to wildfires, brush fires in the state of California. Since the year 2000, California has experienced 15 of the most destructive wildfires in U.S. history. Wildfire season is no longer a season, it's year-long. And so the good old policies and processes and rules and think of 40 years ago is no longer applicable. We are now in a much different world. So our community has seen firsthand the devastation of these wildfires. You don't have to look up and down the state, most recently with the mountain fire. Zone Zero is an effort to try to, for the state of California, to try to prevent destruction. And it started in 2020 with Assembly Bill 3074, which was passed and signed by the governor. That bill directed the state of California, and now under the Board of Forestry, to develop some rules and regulations to try to prevent the level, frequency, and severity of the destruction that we've seen since 2000. Such significant loss. What the law requires. I'm not going to go into all of the detail, but just to give you a little history and context. It establishes a new Zone Zero defensible space requirement. It's the first 0 to 5 feet from your home and around your structure. Homeowners in state responsibility areas, called firefighters, called SRAs, must maintain this space. Tonight we'll learn more about Zone Zero, where it is in the process of adopting the regulations, and how you, the residents of this community, can provide input into that process. I want to start by giving some special recognition. A lot of work went into putting this here and hosting this tonight. I want to thank the Ventura County Fire Department, led by Chief Dustin Gardner right there. Thank you, Chief. We're in their home right now, and it's just a beautiful facility, and this is a community event center. It was really designed for public information in the event of a major disaster. Media could gather, residents could gather, but it also has worked now twice in the last 12 months to hold town halls on important topics like this. I also want to give a shout out to my partner in all things fire prevention. That's Assemblymember Jackie Irwin, who represents this area in the California State Legislature. She's been doggedly involved in the effort to bring resources, policies to prevent wildfires like we've seen, and has been intimately involved in the process here with the Board of Forestry, Zone 0. She's represented here today by Nancy Frawley. Thank you, Nancy, for being here. One of our panelists here today is almost the subject matter expert on it, Dr. Betsy Connolly. Dr. Connolly put together a website on what you need to know about Zone 0, and it's one of the most masterful public communications I've ever seen. I sent it to the fire chief and I said, look at this website, we need to steal this thing. It was really well done and very thoughtful and just clear and concise. And I also want to give a little bit of credit to Shannon Diffner. Shannon, raise your hand, please. Shannon was the inspiration for doing this. Thank you. She said we really ought to do a town hall now where people can hear their voice and share their opinions before the policies are finalized. After they're finalized, it's less important, right? So, so thank you. There's a little bit of housekeeping. Restrooms are going to be out your back door and to the left. Back door to the left, both men's and women's. And exits in case of emergency are to the rear and also out this door here to the left. Those are your exits. And how are you going to have your questions asked? We've done this before, and the best way for this to happen, and we're doing it tonight, is with a comment card that we've asked you to fill out. Fill out a question, and my staff will give them to me. We will get to every single question that we can from the participants here today. So please fill out one of those cards. If you haven't, raise your hand. My staff will give you a card, help you get a pen, fill out your questions. I will ask them from up here to the subject matter experts that we've assembled here today. It's the best way to do it with the time that we have allotted. If you're at home, and there are a lot of people that are at home streaming tonight, I don't know how many, be interesting to know. They can send questions either through the chat on the platform, which I think is YouTube tonight. They can send questions there. My staff will present those to me. We'll try to get them asked. Or they can get to their email and send an email to Supervisor Gorell, or rather easier, district2@ventura.org, district2@ventura.org. I'm gonna say that one more time, sorry, district2@ventura.org. So we're gonna jump in. I'm excited about the folks we've assembled here today. You're gonna hear more about them when they each have a chance to make a presentation. And then when the presentations are done, we may have a little dialogue amongst them, and then we're gonna go to your questions. So I do want to give the title for each of our speakers, and then we'll turn it over to the first one. We've got Jay Lopez here. Jay is a board member for the California Board of Forestry and Fire Protection, the department, the agency made responsible by the governor and the legislature to develop these rules and regulations, Zone 0. We also have Yana Balachek. She's a scientist with the University of California's Agriculture and Natural Resources Fire Network and serves as Associate Director of the UC Agriculture and Natural Resource Policy Institute. We have also with us Steve Hawks. He's a Senior Director of Wildlife at the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. What did I say?
Wildfire, not wildlife.
Wildfire, not wildlife.
Close.
As I mentioned before, we have Dr. Betsy Connolly. She's a longtime community leader. We've got Greg Rubin, a founder of California's own Native Landscape Design Incorporated. We've got Stephen Watson, Executive Director of the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council. And then we have Joe Morelli. He serves as our county's fire marshal in the Ventura County Fire Department. So we're going to turn this over with our first speaker, and that's going to be Jay Lopez from the Board of Forestry and Fire Protection. Thank you for being here, Jay. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. time right here, so make sure that we go. Can we have the slides? Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We delighted that you are here to get informed, to get the latest on this rulemaking. Your opinions are very important to us, so we're here to listen what you have to say. At the same time, for us to share where we are. So right now, is a drafting document that we got, the implementation of Zone Zero, and we're going to give you a little background, rules, and the next steps for it. Zone Zero, as you know, is following the catastrophes of 2017. Brought us to this point, as like you indicated, and is to consider the most important part to reducing the hazard to your home or to any structure per se, not only homes, but it can be a county building, any structures out there, to defend especially against wildfire in the form of embers. And we'll go into that, how fire transmits from the wildland into homes, or from home to home. So where does it apply? Applied in the fire hazard severity zones for the state and the SRA, it's a state responsibility area, which about 1.25 million homes in that area. Or also the local responsibility area in the very high fire hazard severity zone only, which is about 870,000 homes in this whole state. So it's about 17% of the structures in California that this applies to. The combustible zone, they have some stuff that is found in there that we have identified or science have identified as something that can create danger to the home itself, which is mulch, firewood, trash cans, window boxes, lawns, some trees, fences, gates, and outbuildings that are not Chapter 7(8) or approved by the State Fire Marshal. So the way with the regulations will take effect. But right now we were mandated by Executive Order N 1825 to have this by the end of this year submitted. Simultaneously, a guidance document is being created to provide more specific information to each one of the steps and how to go about it. Also, the regulations will apply immediately to new constructions, but then 3 years after for existing buildings and structures. So, through when all this began and we start putting the Board of Forestry start putting a group together to work on this, we had a workshop in 2023 to bring up about 150 people from different agencies, different groups, public, and we just mentioned a few of them right here that work with us to help provide a starting point to the regulation. So this group worked key for that. So the pre-rule making phase now, that's where we are. We have done quite a bit of work. So February was executive order. Zone Zero committee was established. And then we have done public workshops every month. And this month we're gonna do 2. This could be considered also one of those. It'll be 3 this month. And the idea is to reflect the public, receive the public comment, and then the parts that every part in California is different, so the flexibility within the regulation is very important for us to capture from you. The Zone Zero committee mission and goals are to convene the stakeholders, which we are doing tomorrow and also on Monday and today here. And also it requires that considering regional variation, as I mentioned a moment ago, is very important to what happens in Siskiyou County, it doesn't happen in San Diego County. So our recent work, like I mentioned, we have gathered the latest science in Zone Zero, incorporated additional perspective and input from you, additional financial assistance that will be available through the climate bond or other sources. The state wants to make sure that there's money for homeowners associations, fire state councils to conduct this work. And then receiving the updates from Safer from Wildfire recommendations. Safer from Wildfires is a California Department of Insurance program, Title 10 in the state legislature. I highly recommend you look at that. It's lined up to where we do that, and Title 10 is mandated by the state insurance commissioner to the insurance companies to provide discounts for the work that you do on your defensible space and your home hardening as well. And then we're working with economic consultants to complete the economic assessment. Breaking it out to later language, Zone 0 applies to the 5 feet from the outer wall of the house, 5 feet. The zone is modified to apply. Then this has a concept domino effect into Zone 1. So what it is to Zone 1, it gets pushed up 5 foot. But there's some changes to Zone 1 based on that. It's very important to mention single specimen tree. We all remember a tree in our lives, and sometimes we have that beautiful big tree in the front of our house or in the back of our house that is the single specimen that we treasure. So there's special dispensations for that. Also, gates, fences directly attached or adjacent. We know that is the wick that brings the fire into the home. And we talk about also trash cans. And it's not the trash cans in itself, is it what we put in the trash cans can catch on fire, then the trash can is compromised. And then CAL FIRE may allow for existing buildings to comply for those areas that we have very limited space around. So you have a building that is wildfire chapter 7A or part 7 now, compliance might be allowed in there. And ADU construction or adjacent property will not result in the landowner being deemed out of compliance. So breaking down the latest language, continuing that in the LRA, the authority having jurisdiction, in the case Ventura County Fire Department, may choose to develop alternative practices to Zone 0 compliance that will take into consideration the local variation, lot sizes, local fire hazards, plant ecology, local ordinances should be considered. The state government code sets out the minimum, and then the local responsibility can consider those areas, but they cannot be less restricted than the state. And then we have some myths and facts that we want to share with you real quick, which are that the proposed regulation will enforce residents to take all the vegetation up from 30 feet. That is not true. Vegetation is allowed, especially trees, right next to the home. We've been asked for the last 20, 30 years, limit them up off the roof about 5 feet or 10 feet, away from chimneys and stovepipes, 10 feet and 5 feet away from the side of your house or your structure. A clear body of peer-reviewed science shows trees and vegetation protect home from embers. That we see deviation of embers by trees. That happens. But we're concerned about what's happened to those embers when they land. They hit the tree, hit the structure, they go down, and then where they land, that's where we put our efforts. The timeline and next steps is September 25th. Right now we have this today. We have a meeting on the 18th and then a meeting on the 22nd as well. And then we have additional revision to the draft rules. By November, the full board considers to take the rules to package, vote to initiative for rulemaking process. November, December 2025, formal rulemaking commitment period and public hearing to get it completed within the timelines that the governor put into us. And then January 2025, the board considers rulemaking process, complete the formal rulemaking process. So that's where we are so far. I had 10 minutes and 9 minutes and 45 seconds.
Thank you, Jay. You'll have an opportunity to ask Jay questions here when all of the panelists are completed. Folks at home said that they would like to see the PowerPoint slides larger, so we just took care of that. So we'll continue to tweak the technology here and make a great show. So I'd like to now introduce Jana Valakovic. She's a scientist. May I read your bio? She's a scientist with the University of California's Agriculture and Natural Resources Fire Network and serves as Associate Director of the UC Agriculture and Natural Resource Policy Institute. With over 25 years of experience in county government and community engagement, she is a state leader in developing wildfire resilience strategies and serves on both the Governor's Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force and the Wildfire Mitigation Committee. She has conducted post-fire assessments across California and Colorado and has co-authored research on fire behavior and home and landscape design. Thank you, Jana, for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to meet you all. I'm looking forward to a rich conversation tonight. I love it when there's a crowd of people that are disengaged and thinking about their own fire protection or fire safety. I'd like also to acknowledge my colleague Shannon Klisch, who's here from our UC Cooperative Extension Network. You probably know us best through some of our name brand programs like the Master Gardener program, as well as 4-H. And I just want to give a shout out to those Master Gardeners that are maybe in listening shot, because I really see you as very critical and important partners in being able to assist in helping people understand what this transition might look like and how to find that win-win where the aesthetics match you, their sense of protection is there, as well as improved fire safety. So I'm going to talk about the role of Zone Zero. I'm going to do that kind of quickly here. Oops, sorry. It's a little slow. Appreciate the lag here. I think the supervisor set this up very well. I mean, we are at a game-changing moment. We've gone to a tipping point where the wildfire issue is really transforming how we think about this. And the public has largely been demanding something needs to change. You know, if you think about this, over 57,000 structures have been lost in California in the last decade. Another 40,000 or so have been damaged. I mean, this is an irreparable amount of harm. And embers are really recognized as a really critical component to that, that situation that's driving it. I'm going to hop around with a couple of different thoughts here. I just really want to underscore that people are very concerned about trees, and you'll hear from the board is not targeting trees. So in this case on the left, I just thought I'd give you an illustration. The trees are allowed. The issue that Zone Zero is talking about is that very close area to the structure itself, creating those surface fuels. I just thought I'd show another image from Altadena. This is a post-fire image. The tree was not a factor here, but the burn vegetation in the Zone Zero itself is evident. And so you can start to see the relationships between surface fuels and those that are up in the air or the aerial fuels and how they may be interacting and creating benefit and also challenge. Trees are problematic because they do drop debris, they do drop needles and leaves, and that creates a surface fire issue. So maintenance is really what this is all about. And we're really wanting to illustrate that there's a lot that you can do that's within your control to be able to maintain some of these conditions, as well as to maintain the condition of the house. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page around embers. This is an image from the LA Times a few years ago. And there's a lot that's going on in this image. And one of the things that's evident is which direction the wind is coming from. Can you all see that? It's sort of a mess, right? You can see this horizontal swirling, you can see the vertical swirling, but there is a very clear evidence that the wind is coming from the left to the right. And why I say that is because the embers are moving in the air column, colliding with the building on the right-hand side and dropping to the base of the wall. So they can be 20 feet above the surface of the ground, they can be 40 feet, they can be 10 feet, they can be 5 feet, but they're still colliding with that building at some point. And what that does is it creates a whole bed of coals, in essence, that are there readily able to ignite what might be in close proximity. So you can then move a fire from somewhere far away to essentially touching the house. Those embers can also penetrate openings. They can come in through the cap door, they can come in through an open window. There are other ways for embers to get into the structure. So there's two issues at play here. And so we're going to talk about wildfire mitigation. I just want to illustrate that it comes in many forms. There's no one single solution that solves this problem. It's a maintenance issue, both of the structure as well as the vegetation. And there are many homes across California that are basically in a moat of combustible material. And it's hard to recognize that until you come and look at some of these post-fire situations. I know folks are really fired up, so to speak, about the tree issue. And I just want, it takes a while to kind of detangle these issues, but trees are really not being targeted in this set of proposed regulations. Our next speaker is going to talk more about what fuel is, and I just want to say it comes in many forms, including in situations where on the lower right, we use block walls to create separations between structures. It can really maintain some of that radiant heat. But what I've seen commonly in Southern California is that those block walls are coated in vegetation. But there's a climbing vine on that wall, and it serves as a wick, bringing the fire from one location to another. So thinking about what fuel is and thinking about the function of different kinds of mitigations is important in this case. Tonight we're going to talk about some language. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page and understanding what these words mean and what the mitigation strategies are. Mostly what we've been doing for the last several decades has been thinking about how to interrupt fire coming from somewhere else towards the structure. And that is called direct flame contact. And so defensible space came on the books in California in 1965 and was meant to interrupt that pathway so that fire would transition from something taller in the vegetation to something more manageable, where we could put crews to safely stage and defend that structure. So defensible space has been designed to do that. But now we're clearly recognizing that embers and radiant heat are key contributors to the fire loss, the home loss issue. And so embers take a two-pronged approach. You both have to mitigate the fuels that are adjacent to the structure, as well as harden the structure itself. And then radiant heat, which is what's shown on the right-hand side, is this issue where you can have combustion of something adjacent to the structure, and the heat transfer through the air causes some point of failure on the primary building. What I'm suggesting here by the illustration is there's a fail point with the window. And in my post-fire work in both Altadena and Palisades, I will say that what I saw a lot was the vinyl glazing was deforming on the windows, causing the window panes to fall out of the structure. So as we're thinking about fire mitigation, we have to be thinking about it in a complex form with many different strategies and thinking about pathways and what we can do to mitigate those. So I want to give you some illustration of this, and I'll come back to it in a minute, but this idea that fire comes from somewhere else, and especially when we have wind. And when we have wind, our fire crews are focused on trying to help us get out of harm's way. That fire is being moved through the vegetation. At some point, it encounters our backyards, and our backyards have also vegetation as well as other combustible items suggested through this wood fence here. And so fire begins to transmit directly towards our structures. We also have embers that travel long distance, and they can find openings and ways into the building, as well as creating new spot fires and some of that combustible material that's near to the structure. So there's multiple pathways that happen in this kind of model. And so mitigations are designed to prevent that continued wick and that transition. I just thought I'd illustrate through a couple of examples here. These are both from Pacific Palisades, and what you can see is how the vegetation acted as a transition from the wildland into these homes here. In both cases, there was direct firefighter response that put out these fires and prevented the continued combustion of that vegetation and or the structure, where you can see on the left-hand side that the eave and the fascia were ignited. I want to bump us to Colorado for a minute. Here is the Marshall fire that took place in January 2022. This is stucco construction. This is middle of suburbia. This is a place that looks just like here in many ways. This building was completely lost on the backhand side of it. So you can see the front here on the right. You can see the loss in the back. I want to drive in a little bit to look at the vegetation here was in the surface fuels were essentially rock. They used rock and then they planted vegetation in it. Both of those pieces of vegetation ignited and they created a pathway into that structure. And I came back this year and I was curious, well, how did they rebuild? What did they do? And they rebuilt exactly as they had done before. It's complicated to create best management practices and change behavior. That's why regulation comes about, because it's hard to do this, and it's hard at the local level to be able to give people enough incentives to make this work. So I know the Blue Ribbon Task Force recommended that Chapter 7A be applied to all rebuilds in Altadena and Palisades, and that's a political lump that's sometimes hard to take. But without some of those kind of benchmarks, you end up with challenges where we rebuild essentially just how we were before. So coming back to this pathways idea, what you'll see in Zone 0 is the idea that the fence is okay, but the attachment point is the point of concern. So upgrade and replace that attachment point with a metal gate or a metal panel. Think about what those near to home combustibles are and try and give a little space to those structures so that you essentially are breaking the wick. And once you break the wick, then you can slow down that process of runaway combustion of that radiant heat set of issues. I do think there's a lot of reason for hope out there. And this, I know for a lot of folks feels like there's nothing that can be done. But I just want to suggest that once we understand these different types of exposures, the things that we can do that are within our control to both upgrade the condition of our houses as well as reduce some of those fuels and exposures. So I'll end with just a couple of images around some folks that have been implementing this non-combustible area near to the structure and trying to find that balance, that beauty, as well as that functionality. So with that, I will close and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I'd like to introduce Steve Hawks and read you his bio. Steve Hawks is the Director of Wildfire at the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, where he leads wildfire policy, code development, post-fire research, and the Wildfire Preparedness Home Program. He brings more than 30 years of wildland firefighting and prevention experience, having served in CAL FIRE from 1989 to 2022 in roles ranging from firefighter to assistant deputy director. Steve also contributes his expertise on national and academic wildfire advisory councils and spent 13 years on CAL FIRE's incident management teams, IMTs. Thank you, Steve, for being here.
Thank you, Supervisor Burrell. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and good evening, everybody. Cue the presentation. Thank you. Okay, Supervisor Gray gave a good description of my background. So I'll tell you about the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. We are funded to conduct research on severe weather and wildfire and how they impact buildings. And you can see in the slide here our research center with our test chamber located in the center of the campus. And we're able to build full-size structures, place them inside that concrete structure, and then subject them to the 4 different perils that we study. And for wildfire, that's embers inside the test chamber. And we build a full-size structure, place it inside that test chamber, and then expose it to those embers just as a system of components, just as that structure would experience a real-life event. And then see how the wildfire responds to the ember exposure and what vulnerabilities are to homes and businesses from that, and what are the mitigation actions that home and business owners can take to meaningfully reduce the risk to their structures. And we really focus on the conflagration fire, the fire that burns less than 1% of the time and leads to over 95% of all structure loss. It's the fire that we have determined really burns under a very narrow set of factors. And that's drought that occurs at any scale. And it stresses the wildland vegetation where you normally get the ignition of the fire out to the point where it is very receptive to the rapid spread of the fire within that vegetation. And then when it's accompanied by a strong wind component, and the wind being the most significant factor leading to extreme fire behavior, it can easily push the fire through that stressed vegetation. And then when the fire ignition occurs near a community, the wind, the extreme wind, the stress fuels allow the fire to burn into the community very quickly. And so let's take a look at how that unfolds. When you have a fire start in the the wildland area outside of the community, everything that's burning out there, whether it's grass, brush, or trees, is producing embers. And those embers, as Yana pointed out, are the leading cause of structural ignition. They can travel very long distances, and when they land, whether it's on a structure, pass inside the structure through a vent or other void space, they can directly ignite the structure. If they land around the structure, they can ignite other combustible items. Mulch, wood fences are some examples, leading to a fire right next to the side of the structure. In the meantime, the vegetation fire that's burning out in the wildland area is encroaching up on the outer edge of the community. And it's exposing those outer structures to that extreme flames, radiant heat, and embers. And as we begin to see structures ignite, whether it's on the outer edge of the community or inside the community because of the ember exposure, they can, under those extreme conditions, can quickly outpace the ability of local fire suppression resources to keep up with defending structures and protecting lives, which protecting lives is the first order of business. And so really, at that point, the fire transitions from being a wildland fire to an urban fire, burning urban fuels. And in that context, fuel is anything that's combustible. And if you look around your property, look at the combustible items. That could be at the house, ADUs, other structures on the property, fences, wood mulch, vehicles, ornamental vegetation. Anything that's combustible can ignite under the extreme conditions and lead to the spread of the fire within the community and between structures. And at that point, once the fire is established within the community, there's really three factors that we look at as to how easy it is for the fire to spread between structures. And the first one is the structure density. So when you have structures that are closely spaced to each other through direct flames and radiant heat, it's very easy for one structure that's burning to ignite another one, particularly when that structure is downwind. The next one is the connective fuels, which Yana talked about briefly, and that's all the things that are between the structures that can allow the fire to go from one structure or location that it's burning in through a series of combustible objects to get to a new location and ignite another structure. And then the last item is the materials that the homes are made out of themselves. And when you have more vulnerable or combustible components of the structure, it's very easy for these high-intensity fires to ignite those materials. So we've already covered the embers, flames, and radiant heat of how a fire exposes a structure to that fire. But what we need to look at is, what do we do about that? And it starts off with a couple of very basic components of fire and what it needs to ignite in the first place and remain burning. And the top triangle is called the fire triangle. And a fire needs fuel, heat, and oxygen in order to ignite and remain burning. And of those three, the only thing that we can appreciably affect or control is the fuel component. And then the next one is known as the fire behavior triangle. And that's the topography, weather, and the fuel that the fire is burning in at the time. And during a wildfire event, the only one of those that we can control again is the fuel component. So we need to focus on the fuel for wildfire mitigation. And so when we get to the parcel level, how do we prepare a home and thus the homes across a larger community to withstand high intensity wildfire? And so we need to look at two things: the things that surround the house, that expose the house if they ignite to the fire, and then the house itself and the building materials and components that comprise that structure. And so when we look at the area that surrounds the house, there's really three options that we have to deal with all those fuel components or the things that are combustible around our house. We can remove them off the property entirely, if that's an option. We can relocate them further away from the structure so that if they do ignite, they're not right next to the structure and will not lead to the ignition of the home through flames and radiant heat. Or we can make them more resilient. And an example is in the lower corner here, we have a wood fence that transitions to a metal fence. So a fire burning on the wood fence would hit the metal fence and burn itself out, would not be able to burn directly to the side of the house and ignite it. So that's reducing what we call the exposure. So we're trying to reduce the exposure as much as possible. And while we're looking at that, we're also going to address the house. And so we look at all the components of the house, from the roof to the siding, the windows, and everything on the exterior of the house, and what are those components made out of? And when they're more vulnerable or combustible, then it's easy to ignite them. So what do we need to do then to mitigate that risk of that particular item igniting to make it more resilient to withstand the exposure? Because we can never, nor do we want to, reduce the area around the house to zero, to nothing combustible. We don't want to go there, but we can build our house or retrofit the house to be able to withstand that remaining exposure. So it's a combination of two things. It's reducing the exposure through defensible space, and it's increasing the resilience of the structure through the use of better building materials. And so we looked at a lot of different things in our deployment to the LA fires, both the Eaton and Palisades fires. And we focused on the structures that were lightly damaged or just damaged in general. We did not look at structures that were destroyed because you really can't recreate what happened when the building and everything around has been completely destroyed. So we can look, we can see the damage to the structure, we can work backwards, and through talking with a resident or firefighters or obtaining videos or anything, we can reconstruct what we believe happened there. And you have to be on the ground in order to do this. You cannot look simply at photographs and deduce what happened on the ground during the event, because it's an extremely complex environment and you don't know what the exposure level was. Wildfire does not burn with the same intensity throughout the entire area, even across one parcel to the next, right next door. It can be varying levels of intensity from very high to very low. The wind is very shifty, and it can be constant generally in one direction, but within the community, it can be shifting back and forth. And and we don't know if firefighters were on the ground defending the house. And there's many other factors that go into that. So you really can't look at just a photograph and deduce what happened. You have to be on the ground like we did and look at this. So we saw fences, plants, trash cans, synthetic lawns, more plants that ignited and led to damage from structures. And so we've seen this time and time again from our post-fire deployments, that things within that first 5 feet can ignite under these extreme conditions and lead to the loss of the structure. So that led us to do some research here over the last few weeks. And we've heard a lot about well-hydrated plants and that they can help protect homes. And so we did some research where we put some plants 3 feet from the wall of the house with wood cribs simulating a small shed at 20 feet. And this is inside our test chamber. And then we ignited the wood cribs. We put a 25-mile-an-hour wind onto the fire. And within 7 minutes and 7 seconds, the fire ignited the plants, and within 10 seconds after that, the siding ignited. And the moisture content of these plants was 163%.
Watermelon is not 160.
So you might think that this is an extreme fire, but this is what we need to defend homes against. This is the type of fire that burned in the Pacific Palisades, on the Palisades fire, and the Eaton fire. This is the type of fire that we need to protect homes against. And if we don't, we're not going to change the outcome of when these fires ignite. And so you see the plants ignite. So what happens is the radiant heat from the fire and the convective heat that normally goes up is being blown sideways. And it's drawing out at an extreme rate the moisture content off of these plants, and then leading them to their ignition temperature, and then they're igniting and leading to the ignition of the structure. Now, we did this same experiment without the plants in the middle, with just the wood cribs, and we did see damage to the structure, damage to the windows, but it did not lead to the ignition of the house. The plants provided the connective fuels that led to the ignition of the house.
That's interesting.
Thank you, Steve.
Right.
Very
That was
interesting.
very interesting, yeah, thank you. Before I introduce Dr. Connolly, there's two housekeeping things. Just want to remind everyone, there is an overflow room. We have room there. There's a place to sit down, audio, video in the overflow room next door. Secondly, when we're done with the speakers, we're going to go to your questions. If you have a question, please write it down on a comment card, and then my staff will collect them at the end of each row. So they can provide you with the comment cards, and then you can also get them back to them if you have a question. All right, thank you. So let's move now to Dr. Betsy Connolly, longtime community leader. Dr. Connolly holds many titles. She's been dog catcher, equine veterinarian, college professor, and school board trustee. In retirement, she is using the skills and relationships she developed during her working years to protect and serve the Conejo Valley community. Zone Zero Conejo Valley is one of these efforts that she spearheaded. Thank you, Dr. Connolly, for being here this morning.
Thank you. Microphone.
You need the slide.
I do not. Am I on? Sounds like it. So I had my son drive me around, and I took some video of modest and medium priced homes in Thousand Oaks so that I could impress on all of us that we're not talking about pieces of property on the outer rim with large multi-million-dollar homes. Not that we don't have them, but none of these houses are those neighborhoods. These are housing tract neighborhoods built mostly in the 70s and 80s. Many of the newer 80s type homes have side lots that aren't much more than 5 feet wide. We have decks, balconies, outdoor barbecue grills, patio covers in most homes in the Conejo Valley. If you look at Google Maps, satellite view, you'll see them in virtually every backyard. So why am I talking about that? Because I'm not an expert in the wildland-urban interface, nor firefighting or property insurance, but my years as an equine veterinarian, college professor, and school board trustee taught me a lot about decision-making and how the direction we take can have unexpected and undesired consequences. I think that there is good reason to worry that the Zone Zero regulations are taking us in a direction we are going to come to regret. So the first issue I want to bring up is the financial burden. And I can hear some people thinking, well, when it comes to life and losing a home, we shouldn't be balancing that against cost. But the truth is, cost always matters. It matters in healthcare. It matters in what we do about air pollution and other hazards that threaten our lives. And we are always forced to balance the cost of things against the benefits. So I want to point out to you that here in the Conejo Valley, gentle estimates of the costs that homeowners will have to spend in order to answer the mitigation requirements are probably around $50 million. Now, when you look around the state at all of the homes that are going to be affected, this is an enormous amount of money. And I think it is really important that we make sure that this is money well spent on the right things and that we're using the most up-to-date science. The dueling photos of places that burned because of plants and places that didn't burn because of plants tells me that this is not settled science. Although they're not here on the panel today, there are many wildland experts with important things to say about the possibilities that plants, the right kind of plants in the right places, can actually protect homes and protect neighborhoods. And it's concerning to me that the Board of Forestry and the fire industry and the fire insurance industry seems to have turned a deaf ear to those experts. I think it's a mistake. We should be listening. This period of time of constructing these regulations should have been accompanied by more listening and more input from the public and from alternative views from scientists about what is actually going on in our neighborhoods. I want to add to that fire is not the only threat to public health. Plants, many of which will have to be removed because we don't have property with 30 feet on every side or 100 feet on every side. So when we start talking about these regulations, we're talking about having a significant impact on the number of green plants, even the potted plants on your patio or by your front door. We're talking about a significant impact. And those plants cool the air. They filter pollutants out of the air that when they are left to breathe, damage people's health. So these are not, it's not aesthetics versus safety. That's a false construct. What it is that we can't have everything and we can't afford to do everything. And that we have to make hard choices. And some of those choices could involve losing some of our plants, but some of those choices could involve accepting that we can't make ourselves 100% safe from fires and not then have a risk of more air pollution, more heat in our cities, running our air conditioners more, putting a greater burden on the electrical infrastructure. So beyond that $50 million, just for the Conejo Valley, beyond that is what about the cost for our electricity to run our air conditioners another 10 or 20% more often for the year? And that's not a one-time cost, that's year after year after year. And if you live in the Conejo Valley, you know that if you have a shade tree, it keeps your house from getting as hot. I mean, it's just a fact, right? So if we, and I know we're gonna have specimen trees, blah, 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 but the truth of the matter is a lot of our bushes, we took down some bushes because we did some renovations at our house last year. They weren't any taller than me. That side of the house, I can put my hands on the inside wall and feel the heat radiating into the house on that side. So maybe it's worth it to pay more for our electricity, for our air conditioning, but let's not pretend this isn't going to have extraordinary costs associated with it. And it's disturbing to me that we're not talking about that and that we're dismissing removal of vegetation as an aesthetics issue rather than talking about it as a cost issue, as an environmental health issue, as a cooling of our cities issue. Those should be the topics that we're discussing when we balance the removal of vegetation against other concerns.
Dr. Palmer. I'd now like to introduce and read the bio for Greg Rubin. He's the founder of California's own Native Landscape Design Incorporated. Has spent over 30 years designing more than 800 fire-resistant native landscapes across Southern California. Named the 2018 Horticulturist of the Year by the San Diego Horticulturist Society. His designs have proven resilient and with projects surviving 25 fire events without the loss of a home. He is also the co-author of The California Native Landscape and the Drought-Defying California Garden. Thank you, Greg, for being here. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you. All right, guys, I got a little different perspective for you. I'm up from San Diego. I guess I'm an interloper. But you know, we know a thing or two about fires down in San Diego too. And we went through kind of this learning curve back around, starting Pines Fire, Kumishaw Fire, Witch Creek Fire, Cedar Fire. Yeah. So as the supervisor mentioned, we've had 25 fire events in our properties. And knock wood, all those homes survived. Okay. And some of the things that we're seeing in real life, in a real honest to goodness fire situation, I think can come to bear here. And, you know, we need to look at this, I think, in a little more nuanced way. My mentor, when I decided to get into native plant, I used to be an aerospace engineer. Did that for 9 years, had 12 patents, had a really good career. And then I decided to follow my passion, right? Turn my avocation into my vocation for native plants. And since then, you know, 800 landscapes plus. And one of the neat things about my mentor when I started this, Bert Wilson, who owned Las Politas Nursery, he's passed, unfortunately. He was a 14-year Cal Fire veteran. He'd been beating this stuff into my head since day one, okay? And things pretty much played out as predicted. And it really sung to me as having a science background and engineering background, especially in things like fluid dynamics, aerodynamics, okay? Laminar flow versus turbulent flow, orographic lift, okay? I feel that's really getting short shrift in this discussion. Okay, we just want to blame the plants. Plants are fuel, plants burn, right? We need to talk about hydration. I know Steve kind of countering that. But with all due respect, that test you did in South Carolina, that isn't really representative of how the vegetation is burned in most cases, okay? It's really like a blowtorch, all right? For 7-8 minutes, okay? In our experience, these are ember-driven fires. And embers get moved by wind. These are wind-driven fires. The catastrophic fires are wind-driven. We have fuel-dominated fires all the time. We've had about 20 or 30 of them in San Diego County this summer, and they're very containable. We're not losing lives. We're not losing that much property, if at all. Okay, well, all bets are off when the Santa Anas kick up. I mean, we've been living with this stuff our whole lives down here, right? You know, and for thousands of years before that. So what I want to mention, let me do this right. Okay, so that's Altadena. Maybe you notice how green it is after the fire, okay? More of the evidence is showing that in a lot of cases, vegetation was acting to block, slow the flows, deflect, to catch and cool embers, okay? You wouldn't put green wood on a fire, would you? Okay. So let's say you have your house on the hill. Hey, let's remove all the fuel. Nothing to burn there, right? Well, what's going to protect your house? These fires skip major freeway interchanges without skipping a beat. So just some food for thought there, and I'm looking forward to the question and answers. I just have a very short presentation here. So just some basic concepts. Fire resiliency occurs from the house outward, not the landscape inward. Okay? Home hardening, in our experience, is 80% of the battle. And then this, I know, again, Steve says this is not in play. In our experience, hydration is everything. And how do I know this? Because I conducted a 4-year research project for the United States Navy in partnership with Dr. John Keeley, who's one of the world's foremost fire ecologists. And we looked at rate of fire spread as a function of live fuel moisture content. And this is for native plants, guys, and everybody wants to kind of look at them as the boogeyman. Well, guess what? They hold on to moisture in the face of flames better than just about anything else. And the corollary is that it requires so little supplemental irrigation to actually hydrate a native plant to an appropriate level of live fuel moisture, LFMC. And this is proved out over and over, 25 fire events, properties, okay? And a lot of times our property was the only one left standing. People had cleared for 100, some 300 feet around their properties. And the house, unfortunately, was a pile of rubble with a chimney. And maybe some little skinny queen palms around the outside. And their lawn, the lawn's always intact. Lawn doesn't burn, but the embers go right over that. It's laminar flow, it's a wind tunnel, okay? We're not looking at how we can affect these ferocious flows of embers, especially in these close-packed communities. Because what are we doing around the outside of these? Plant an ice plant? How about mature oaks and sycamores and cottonwoods and toyon and lemonade berry and coffee berry and ground covers to create a different size class of different vegetation, different size classes, so as these flows come in, okay, they are slowed from all that drag, and they're catching everything, cooling them, and redirecting flows through all kinds of processes, all right? This is missing from our discussion, guys, okay? All right, and I'm telling you, and unfortunately, most of our native vegetation is actually gone here, right? I grew up in Chatsworth, and I left here about 32 years ago. Boy, is Newbury Park changed. I was lost, man. But good for you. It's a beautiful community. But notice all these hills are just covered in grass, right? Flashy fuels. That's cow pasture. Not native stuff. That's not what California looked like. Anyway, a couple other points, and I'll shut up here. Hit the wrong button. Bear with me. I apologize.
Just slow. The right.
Thank you.
Delay.
Yeah, wind-driven, not fuel-driven fires. Agencies and ordinances advocating brush clearance may actually be contributing to far more vulnerability, okay? So as we focus on vegetation as just simply fuel, the potential benefit of hydrated plants to slow block, deflect, catch, and cool embers is ignored. Some of you saw this article in the LA Times a few months ago. This is in Palisades. There is this hedge, a nicely hydrated, healthy hedge. And here it is after the fire. There's the direction of the fire, the direction of the embers. Obviously, the neighbor unfortunately didn't do too well. There's singeing and burning on that side of the hedge. On this side of the hedge is still green, and we have an intact home. Okay. It's very easy to blame fuel, right? As far as zone 0, you know, Bert was a big proponent of zone 0. And I used to be too, okay? And there's probably evidence that the apron helped here. I mean, this is the Witch Creek fire, guys. That silver streak on the hillside was an old metal water tank. It was a bit hot. Every single one of these neighbors burned to the ground, most of whom had cleared 100 to 300 feet. By the way, Dr. John Keeley and Alex Seifert did a study that showed that the real critical area for fires is 15 to 68 feet from the house. Clearing beyond that actually becomes counterproductive. And clearly, I mean, it was so hot it burned the lawn, okay? And there's scorch marks on it. The stucco is undamaged, right? But then look at this case here, another house not too far away. And that vegetation was hydrated, okay? It singed, just perfectly alive. Came back beautiful and green. But didn't even create enough radiant heat to scorch the stucco, that white stucco, okay? So in our experience, I think there's just some basic things you can do. In new landscape construction, let's put aprons around it. Easy, okay? You're not removing or destroying things to do that. It's new construction, okay? The problem is with you guys that have these beautiful landscapes and maybe a 50-year-old heirloom azalea that's growing next to the house. Maybe it's a retired couple and we expect them to come in and just rip that out, you know? Why not just prune it away from the walls, prune it away from the eaves, take out the dead wood, make sure it's healthy and hydrated. That damn hydrangea might actually save the house, okay? So, little different perspective, right? But a lot of experience. And this is what we found consistently over and over again. Thank you.
All right, now I'm going to introduce my friend Stephen Watson, the Executive Director of the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council. He's recognized as a leader in wildfire preparedness. Over the past 4 years, he has driven the council's rapid growth, advancing programs such as the home hardening and the finalize USA community development that are strengthening wildfire resilience across Ventura County. Stephen's hands-on experience with these initiatives, combined with his leadership in building strong organizational systems, gives him a unique perspective on both the practical and the strategic challenges of preparing communities to live safely with wildfire. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Jeff. Supervisor Gorell. Thank you everyone for coming here tonight. I think what's really exciting for me is that we're even having this opportunity to have different perspectives and share resources and ideas and thoughts and research that's out there. I do want to thank Supervisor Gorell for letting us come together and have these conversations, and all of you for coming and being a part of this. So you may be thinking, who's this guy? Why is he up here? What's a Fire Safe Council? So we are, there's a delay, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, I'll wait. Great. So fire safe councils are typically 501c3 nonprofits, and they meet the needs of the wildfire preparedness within the communities. So we are a grassroots organization that works with communities and residents to prepare themselves for wildfire. And we have a volunteer board of directors, and there are a few of them in this room. And if you raise your hand, they'll help you out with any questions or information. And I do want to say that I typically do these presentations and talk about the wildfire problem, the challenges, the destructions that's happening. But we've already kind of gone through that. And I think that I want to talk about how there is now a shared responsibility when it comes to wildfire. Wildfire is changing, and there's a community involvement portion to this. And our role as the Fire Safe Council is to help out and provide information, resources, and remove some of the barriers. I think Betsy spoke very clearly about the challenges and the barriers that will come and we'll see when it comes to not even just zone 0, but home hardening, which is something that almost all experts agree upon. And where we come in is to provide information by removing those barriers, whether it's lack of information, whether it's funding. We have limited funding to provide home retrofits or defensible space assistance, or I should probably use the slides, right? Oh, it went right away this time. So these are just some of our programs that our organization offers, and I mentioned a couple different ones which are lumped into that resident grant program. We also do free home wildfire assessments. So I want to hear a show of hands. Who's signed up for or had a home wildfire assessment from us? Oh, wow, that's more than I thought it would be.
They're your people.
All right, so we're taking advantage of this free service, and since we're a nonprofit, we are not enforcement. So we're not coming in there and telling you, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. It's recommendations. It's providing information and education on all of this home hardening that we think is so important and crucial. Greg talked earlier about embers. One of the biggest causes of a home burning down are the embers coming into vents and screens. Show of hands, who knows the size of their mesh screening on their vents? Okay, who has 1/4 inch mesh screening? Okay. Who has 1/8 or higher? Or smaller, I suppose.
Let it go.
Okay, great. So these are some of the things that we can send out, one of our trained assessors, walk around the property with you, identify some low-hanging fruit that can significantly increase your home's protection from wildfire. And wherever we land on our agreements or disagreements when it comes to vegetation in Zone 0, there are certain things that, to my knowledge, everyone agrees upon. And I'll probably be surprised. There will probably be some people that are, maybe there's someone in the room that only sells wood fences with wood gates, right? They may not agree with us on this one, but wood fences attached to the home is a clear line of fire coming right to the home. So we can go around and provide some of these tangible efforts that can be done now. So the thing that I want to kind of put out there for everyone is, let's not wait to see what happens with the Zone 0 regulation, to act on the measures and things that we can do now. And the way that we can help out with that is providing information, coming out there, giving you a report, geotagging each of those spots, so you don't have to remember everything we're going through there. You'll have a nice report that shows you where and what, and some recommendations as well. I actually forgot to start my timer. I usually do that because I can talk for a while if you can't. If you haven't figured that out by now. So normally I would go through and kind of show these pictures and do that, but I think we've gone through a little bit of that, and in the interest of time, I'm gonna kind of skip ahead a little bit. These are just showing some examples of the work that we've provided to homes free of cost. And one of the things that I do want to mention is we're currently working on a contractor training for landscapers and construction contractors, ones that specialize in construction, to try and teach them about home hardening information and getting them up to speed. So this is Ventura County landscapers and contractors. And on the landscaper side of things as well, kind of these principles and ideas for creating this directory that we can provide to residents. So the number one question we get when doing home assessments is, who can I go to get this work done? And as a 501c3 nonprofit, we don't want to be endorsing or promoting any particular individual business. We want it to be something that's more holistic, and we have this training accompanying with this directory that we can provide to residents. What I'm putting up here is, if any of you have worked with landscapers or contractors that you've been really happy with, this is the QR code for requesting them to be involved in that training or to sign up. So we really want to get as many as we can here to provide as many options as possible, because regardless of what happens with Zone 0 regulations, there's going to be a need for these landscapers and contractors to be trained, right? And so with that note, I do encourage you all to share this information. I always have to look at my notes because I forget things many times, so bear with me on this. The other thing that we're seeing, and I think that this is commonly agreed upon as well, is that neighborhood hardening is crucial. It can't just be one home here, it can't just be one home here. We're all in this together, and there is that shared responsibility. If your home isn't hardened, you're putting your neighbors and your community at risk as well. And a lot of what we're doing now and the grants that we're trying to apply for, our organization is almost entirely grant funded. So we have to seek out funding, write grants, and then provide those services to the community. We're looking at neighborhood hardening programs now. We're identifying and targeting the most vulnerable at-risk communities to be able to come in within the next year or two to provide significant amount of funding to harden the entire neighborhood. And that's talking about that, those low-income communities that are right up against the wildland-urban interface, which will be the buffer for the rest of the communities. And so one thing that I guess I want to clarify, and I meant to do this at the very beginning, we're not researchers at the Fire Safe Council. And we rely on the conversations and the discussions that happen here, and and the regulations that are being created to determine what type of information we share out to the communities. So I appreciate very much these conversations, being able to have them, and Jay Lopez for even coming out here and doing this, because it's really exciting that we live in a state where people can provide their feedback and their input, and it's listened to, and we're already seeing some of the changes to the regulations. And is everyone going to be happy when these are done? Absolutely not. You know, there's a spectrum of, and even among fire safe councils, there's not an agreement on where we land. So we may be here, we may be here, but at the end of the day, the fact that the information is being received and gathered, I think is really important for all of us. And we have some materials in that table in the back. We have I have to make this plug because we're a nonprofit. We have an annual event coming up November 6th, and it's free for anyone to enter. Free beer, free food. We hope you all join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Again, before I introduce our fire marshal, we do have an overflow room next door with video, if anyone would like to sit down. It's usually the one, he's the one usually doing those kind of instructions. Also, if you'd like to receive a comment card and write a question, it can be answered by our panelists in just a few minutes. Please raise your hand and my staff will come by and provide you with a card. You want to hand that down? Hand that down to the end. So just hand the cards down and
Yeah, give it to Nancy, she's very responsible.
there may be some duplicate questions, we're gonna try to get through that. So now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce Joe Morelli. Joe Morelli serves as the fire marshal for the Ventura County Fire Department, working closely with the Fire Prevention Bureau to fulfill Ventura County Fire Department's mission of anticipating and responding to the dynamic public needs of our community. Ventura County is home to nearly 8,500 residents with a focus on fire prevention, code enforcement, and community risk reduction. Fire Marshal Morelli ensures that residents and businesses across Ventura County are better prepared and more resilient in the face of wildfire and other emergencies. Thank you, Joe, for being with us here tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for putting this together, Supervisor Grohl. I appreciate all the perspectives that were shared tonight. I learned something from each one of you, and part of that is hearing from the community, hearing what the concerns are, and that's important to us. So I'm going to share, there's a lot that I don't have to share because it was, you heard from the professor, the doctor, the researcher. So I'm going to cover a couple other things. First of all, if you're wondering if the Zone 0 regulations will apply to you, it's the same statewide. It applies, as you heard, to the state responsibility areas or the local responsibility area, the very high fire hazard area. So you can look up this QR code if you want to see. You're probably here because you're in one of these areas. That's why I don't see a lot of phones coming out to get that QR code. But if you want to see, they have an address finder on this website, so you can look that up either at that site or using that QR code. These maps, the CAL FIRE maps, were updated recently by state law. We are required to adopt those maps, and so if you weren't in a fire hazard area a year ago, you might be in one now because of these new maps that came out. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of that. These maps were developed based on fire history. They're based on the fuel weather topography of an area. We have quite a bit of fire history here in the county. They included anything up until 2019, any fire history. The state probably will be updating the maps again in 5 years. So if you're not in an area now, that might change. And some of that is based on fire history. We've had a number of significant large loss fires in this county, not just in this county, but as you've heard in the state, and it is shaping what the laws are statewide. This year alone, I think there were about 200 wildfire-related bills that went through the process and went to the governor's office. This month is a pivotal month where we will find out what laws will be, will be approved and signed into law. So every time we have these significant fires, there's changes in statewide laws, and these regulations were part of that, as well as the governor's executive order to release or speed up the development of those regulations by the end of the year. So now the question is, what do we do with that? Because here we are, we're 3 months from the end of the year. The governor issued this executive order in January after the Palisades and Eaton fire. And there's a high probability that there will be Zone 0 regulations, and we will find out very soon what those will be. I do think it's important to hear from the community. As you heard, the State Board of Forestry is having a meeting tomorrow. If you want to provide public comment, I'm not sure if there's an opportunity tonight, to the State Board of Forestry, tomorrow would be a great opportunity. We will hear the questions tonight, but you can attend remotely as well, and you can provide public comment and be part of that process. As far as what we're going to do in Ventura County Fire Department, first I want to share with you what we have already been doing. Just a big picture, not just for wildfire risk reduction, but overall community risk reduction, no matter what it is. There's usually 5 different things or strategies for risk reduction. There's engineering. In this case, that's how you build it. So we have had Zone 0 regulations in place, not regulations, Zone 0 requirements for new construction going back to 2019. And the reason for that is that we have had several large loss fires in the county. It's a lot easier to do when you're building a new structure than it is when you're dealing with 60,000 existing occupancies in the county. And that's how many we have in the county where these regulations will apply. And that number increased from 50,000 to 60,000 just a couple months ago. So our approach is engineering, not building back the same problem that was there. So especially after you have a destructive wildfire, you lose 100 homes. What you never want is for another fire to happen like that again in the same community and burn down just as many homes. It should be different. How you build things, defensible space, it makes a difference. So that's the engineering. We're always going to have emergency response. And we do have a robust fire department, helicopters, dozers, we have it all. Education is critical. So as far as what the fire department is doing, right now we're standing up a team of educators. We're educating internally, so every member of our fire department can share the basics of these regulations once they do come out. Because they're going to be asked questions in the grocery store. They're going to be asked questions when they're out on call. So we're educating internally. We're educating throughout the county. And part of this is very critical for us is working with our partners because we simply don't have the resources to educate 850,000 residents with our department. So our partnerships, partnership with the Fire Safe Council, we point a lot of people to them. They're doing great work. We've got the website. Please go see their website. They do have great resources. We also, another strategy is economic incentive, but we don't do anything about this right now. This is happening because people's insurance are being dropped from their coverage. And so they do provide economic incentives when you take some of these measures. If you don't do it because it's going to be part of the regulations, a lot of the insurance companies are requiring Zone 0, not even ember intrusion resistant, a non-combustible Zone 0 5 feet around the structure. And they'll either, and some of them provide discounts if you take certain home hardening measures. Enforcement is the last thing we want to do. That is a strategy, and it is part of my responsibility as a fire marshal for the county and for the fire department by state law to do some enforcement. But before we do any enforcement, we're going to be doing 3 years of just massive education. That's our goal. So as far as just our plan moving forward, it's going to be to educate, work with our partners, and ultimately we will have these regulations soon, and we want to support the community through it. I did want to share one last thing before I finish here. aside from our partnerships, we do have statewide partners. And as far as these regulations go, if you want to know, well, what has the fire department done about it? We have been part of these meetings along with the public, providing public input and comment. One of the amendments that we were part of putting forward and supporting is an amendment to give more local control and alternatives. We're hopeful that that will be hopefully approved and part of the regulations. We think that it will, there's not necessarily a one size fits all, and it would provide some local flexibility. Aside from that, I'm gonna stay within the time here. Something else to be aware of, these are insurance, if you wanna go to the California Insurance Commissioner's office, this QR code will bring you there, but what I wanna share with you is that if you're not doing this because you don't agree with it, I just want you to be aware there are insurance regulations, and here are the home hardening measures that they look at. Zone 0 is one of those. So sometimes insurers will allow people to stay on their insurance because of taking these measures. They'll give discounts if you've taken these measures, and it's not necessarily you have to do all of them, but the more of these measures that you take on your home, the more hardening you do of your home, defensible space, and including the Zone 0. Make sure that you share with your insurance companies what measures you've taken on your home, because it might make a difference with your coverage, with your rates. I don't want to overpromise anything, but I can just tell you, I live in a very high fire hazard area. It does make a difference to be educated on this. So I'm here to, with my team in the back afterwards, also to answer questions. But thank you very much for having us tonight.
Thank you, Fire Marshal. You know, a question was asked earlier, most of the folks in here, not all, are from the Conejo. How much of the Conejo, and this may be for you, Fire Marshal Morelli, how much of the Conejo is in the, what we call the extreme high fire severity zone? I think I saw the maps, the most recent iteration of the maps, and it looked like 100% of the Conejo fell within that area.
But it's close.
Well, it's about, we have 60,000 properties countywide. I don't know what the breakdown is, off of all the areas, but it's.
If you wouldn't mind answering,
So we have 60,000 properties countywide that are in one of these areas where the Zone 0 regulations will apply. There's an additional 30,000 properties that are in a moderate hazard area. But what we saw in the past is areas that were in a moderate hazard area, the maps were updated, and then they were in a very high fire hazard area. So this is important, not just for the 60,000, but also the insurance companies are applying these requirements beyond those 90,000 properties in some cases.
Well, thank you. If you wouldn't mind, actually, that kind of falls into this first question from the audience, and you hit upon it. Maybe Jay Lopez may have some information too, but is there an effort being made to have insurance companies, admitted insurance companies, sync up their own policies regarding home hardening and defensible space to gain coverage or renewals with what's coming from the Department of Forestry next year, or the Bureau of Forestry, with these requirements? Is there an effort at the state level perhaps to sync up with insurance companies so that what they deem to be important is incorporated in what Zone 0 will impose upon property owners? Is there those kind of conversations at the state level or local level?
So I'll answer part of this, and our panelists here, I think Steve will probably be able to add to this, maybe even Jay. Where the syncing up has occurred, it's between the State Fire Marshal's office and the California Insurance Commissioner. If you look at those safer from wildfire regulations, what you'll notice is that if you look at that and you look at the California Fire Code requirements for new construction of a building, they're almost exactly the same, and that's not a coincidence. The State Fire Marshal has done an outstanding job, I think, educating the insurance industry, and those two do sync up. And the insurance industry does use those regulations when they're determining what the cost for your insurance is going to be. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Steve, or Jay?
Is this on? Test?
Yeah.
My background is in wildfire. I'm not an insurance expert, and we don't represent the insurance industry at IBHS where we conduct research. What I know and can say about insurance is that each insurance company is a unique entity and they make business decisions based on what they feel is right for their company. And so I cannot say how one might interpret a zone zero regulation from the board versus another one. But what I can say is that reducing the risk is the right choice, reducing the risk from the wildfire from defensible space perspective, as well as home hardening. Doing the systems-based approach to wildfire mitigation reduces the risk to the maximum extent possible to give homes the best chance of surviving. And insurance companies are in the business to write insurance policies, but they want to write good risk versus whatever they view as bad risk. And so if Yana and I are neighbors and she does a lot of good wildfire mitigation work and I don't do anything, she's gonna get the policy from the insurance company and I may not. So Jay, do you have anything you wanna add?
And I was glad that you, Morelli, you put the code there, or the QR code for the Safer from Wildfire program from the California Department of Insurance, which is already doing some of these measures to give you some discounts by insurance companies. You do. So again, I mentioned that again, Title 10 of the California Building Code, you can find those. Very important to know that the insurance industry is not a monolith. Every insurance company does different. So we might be neighbors, all of us, but everybody has a different insurance company because they spread the risk. So be aware of what one insurance company does, the other one doesn't. So there's the effort to line up fire hazard severity zones, affected areas under the Zone Zero, and the what is currently in the California Department of Insurance is existing. So we want.
I just want to tag on a little bit to this. How many people are on the FAIR plan right now? Of those, how many people want to get off the FAIR plan? Right? My estimate, I just bought a new house, that's why I got the 1/4-inch screen. So my estimate on the FAIR plan was $14,000. I bought insurance from a non-admitted carrier at $4,000. So I'm talking from my personal experience here. That's a big amount. I recognize that being on the FAIR plan is not a comfortable place to be. So the insurance commissioner has agreed to one of the requests from the insurance industry, which is to allow catastrophe modeling, which is forward modeling that's forecasting risk, because they want to ultimately figure out how to price that risk in a way that is going to work for all of us and work for them, of course. But within that, the guarantee is that existing insurance companies, if they want to use that catastrophe modeling, will write plans in places where the FAIR plan only has been offered. So it's an incentive, in essence, to be able to try and transition people out of the FAIR plan into the regular admitted carriers market. And it comes with that desire to be able to do that forward forecasting look using catastrophe modeling. So there's a lot of things at play in here. It's a dynamic moment right now. And we're going to see how all of this sort of interrelates. And I think it's a fantastic question, because really what the Board of Forestry is doing is level setting and creating a minimum state standard so that we're all operating in the same perspective right now, because it's a very uneven playing field right now where a lot of people are saying, oh, well, if you just do this or if you just do that, and they can be completely at odds. Once this is settled, we'll have a very clear set of predictable metrics to be able to work forward from.
Thank you. And you actually kind of raised the next question by mentioning statewide standards. There's also thematically been an outcry for kind of local perspective, local input, some prerogative and flexibility by our local subject matter experts and fire chiefs and fire marshals. And so it sounds like in the last number of months, the language is either changed or might change to include some local input. I'd like to know a little bit more about that, what that might look like, local input. It sounds to me like it might be more of a stricter policy only and not less, less strict. And if you could talk a little bit about the philosophy behind trying to incorporate local control and what kind of local control we might have here through our fire marshal and fire experts.
I could start on that. So the amendment that has gone before the Board of Forestry to be considered, it gives the local jurisdiction the ability to develop alternate practices that essentially provide for the same practical effect. We don't know exactly what that looks like, but it's not one of these, it's not an amendment that says you can adopt something more restrictive necessarily. It's that you can have alternate options to achieving the same goal, essentially. So in some cases, it could be less restrictive, or it's just other ways of hardening. It might be hardening your home, but it would definitely give some local control throughout the state, which I do believe is necessary.
Can I have a crack at
Oh,
that?
yeah, please, Dr.
Okay.
Connell.
So I happen to have here the latest draft language for alternative methods, and I'm just gonna read it. The provisions of these regulations are not intended to exclude alternative methods not specifically prescribed by these regulations. A fire expert designated by the director, I'm assuming that's the director of the Board of Forestry, it doesn't say. CAL FIRE director, you should put that in there, may approve alternative practices which provide for the same practical effects as those stated in these regulations within the SRA. That's the state responsibility area. Within the LRA, the local responsibility area, that's us, the authority having jurisdiction may choose to develop alternative practices for Zone 0 compliance that take into account local variation, including differences in geography, geology, ecology, city and county ordinances, and architecture. That's what it actually says right now. So first, the director of CAL FIRE has to recognize a fire expert, doesn't have to, may do that. And the practical effects that are proposed at the local level have to, whatever the changes that are approved at the local level, they have to have the same practical effect. I did a document search to see if there was any discussion of practical effects in the draft. There is not. So I'm just gonna throw out there and say the same practical effects is defensible space. I think that's probably what the committee means by that. And less homes lighting on fire. That's what I think it is. It doesn't say that, but I think that's what it is. And so I guess Supervisor Burrell, as a concerned constituent, I'm wondering how this turns into local control or local flexibility in enforcement. So much of what the members of the Board of Forestry, their backgrounds are in big lots, forests with trees, not chaparral. And I think we're gonna need local experts who know about our topography, our homes, the way our small lot lines. And I'm worried that this language just ties us up in should or could or mays and not in the Board of Supervisors, who's the Board of Directors for the fire department, and the fire department, who are the experts in fighting these fires. I'm afraid those voices are gonna get lost in this, and I'm not reassured by the language that I just read.
Yeah, thank you. As I understand the conflict, we have statewide standards so that there's not special treatment for this property owner or that property owner. But I also I understand the flip side of it, your perspective, where as essentially a fire commissioner myself, who sits on a board that oversees the fire district, I would love to see more flexibility built into this policy for our subject matter experts who I trust implicitly. So hopefully they work that out. Hopefully that they're hearing this and working this out. Hopefully, I know that they're hearing it from our folks too, is giving that kind of flexibility. I have a series of questions that are all hitting upon something similar. And the question maybe we could talk about is, we've been chatting about property, zone 0, 5 feet from the property. A lot of folks in here in the Conejo, you're surrounded by open space. Some of that open space is not maintained as well as they suspect it should be. This hits close to home for me because I sit on the board of directors for the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. And many of you may live and back up to Casca controlled property. There's other property owners out there, federal government, state government, Caltrans, a lot of open property that could provide kindling that could be a threat to our residential communities. Does anyone want to talk about what is going on simultaneous to structure protection to what we might be doing for the open space and the wildfire area?
Can I speak to that a little bit? That's a really good question too. So a lot of wildland around here is badly degraded. It's been converted to basically non-native cow pasture.
Covered with most.
Those flashy fuels just go up simultaneously. Unfortunately, that's where a lot of fire crews get hurt or worse, so they lose engines, and the stuff is so fast, it's all they can do to get out of the way. So you do have areas there that are still some pretty healthy, clean chaparral. What I mean by clean, I mean that it's pretty much weed-free. And if you've been hiking in the chaparral, a healthy stand, one of the things you notice is a complete lack of weeds. Indians can walk 200 miles barefoot. You wouldn't go 200 feet barefoot through a typical field, right? So it's management and that interface. And what is important and what has been shown is also part of our research for the Navy is thinning. Cut out all the deadwood, reduce the canopy by maybe 40, no more than 50%. You end up with something that looks like a beautiful natural park. You still have all that incredible wildlife habitat, okay? And it doesn't require a heck of a lot of maintenance. So now we create this sort of this buffer, this transition from an ornamental yard to unmodified, wildlands. And so, and in fact, you may be safer by removing and removing all the grasses and weeds and restoring with native plants. And again, managing it, because when you have a little bit less canopy, there's more moisture resources available to the individual plants. So guess what? They stay better hydrated. That makes sense. Weeds rob all that without returning anything to the system. They just suck it dry. So that's my thought on that.
And I'll just comment very briefly. In the fire department, we have two areas that we're looking at. There's a 100-foot defensible space zone, and then we have a wildland unit in the county that's dedicated to doing fuel reduction projects throughout the county, applying for grants. One of those is Supervisor Grell supported us in obtaining. And we also do some prescribed burning, but the conditions that have to be in place in order to do that, it has to be just right. You have to have the right relative humidity. You can't have too much wind. It has to be on the right day. And so we do what we can in the county, but it is a challenge with some of the open space. They want to preserve it, and we want to we want to limit the fuel. So it is going to continue to be a challenge.
Jake, please.
So just real quick, so there are efforts by the state and the governor created the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force to deal with this type of work. You guys have been an example, Ventura County has been an example. I'm a formerly retired from Los Angeles County Fire Department. I got to work with so much vegetation management people you have. And you have Terry Rayleigh, used to be a great vegetation management for you guys, and he will call them surgical projects, where it makes sense, where you can make that difference. And just like Greg said, that the amount of work that is needed to modify, in some way, we don't need to invent nature, we just need to imitate nature. So clustering is very common in plants out there. So Terry was really good at doing that, and I know you guys doing a great job here in Ventura County. So there's some work being done. It just takes a little while because it's the environmental compliance documentation takes a long time. So for every project, 1 day of work in the project, either prescribed fire or vegetation management, it's about 200 days of paperwork that needs to be created to do that. So just make your work.
Before I get into the next series of questions, these are very kind of detailed about kind of different property questions. I want to ask if folks here want to have an impact on the ultimate outcome of what this language of Zone 0 looks like between now and then formally being adopted. What are the opportunities for people to have input? Tonight's just a town hall. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate your listening to the perspectives. And it sounds like tomorrow is a formal meeting. How do people participate and provide input through the formal process?
So in order to do this, we are under what is called the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. So when we work on this, as you can see, the other two members of the committee, they're not here. We're not allowed to talk till the day of the meeting. Everything that we do happens in front of you, Open Meeting Act. So tomorrow's a workshop is one of those. However, the public comment email is open all the time. And it's public comment, bof.ca.gov. Once again, public comment at bof.ca.gov. And you can send your comments there. And that's the best way to get it to us because we don't get to talk, so I get to read them. The other partners get to read them. So that's the way. And it will be part of the documentation that we have. During the workshops, it's also another opportunity to do that either in person or you call it virtually. So it's a workshop tomorrow, but it's also a workshop on Monday, the 22nd, that will be in Sacramento.
Okay, thank you. So there's an email. It sounds like there's public meetings.
Website.
What's that?
There's a website. We
Oh,
can
there's a
make sure-
website.
Actually has the-
We'll make sure that we publish some of this as best we can in our own newsletter and on my office website. So we'll get these different opportunities out there. The next couple of questions are very kind of intimate about specific properties, but I think maybe other people are wondering too. The first question is about a neighbor having an issue. So in this one, it's a jacaranda tree, leans on their property or is leaning toward their property. What do you do when it's your neighbor that's not complying with something, not just maybe Zone 0, but generally a hazard?
I can answer that question. So normally, when we follow up on all complaints. So if anyone has a concern, I had it up on the slide, our contact for our website, our email, and we will always follow up on complaints. Now, as soon as I say that, we're gonna get 100 and but we always follow up and we try to be very responsive to our community. The other thing that happens too, though, is that when someone is filing a complaint, I want you to be aware that when we come out, we will look at your property and we will look at their property. Because we have to treat everyone the same. And so oftentimes what I find is we'll go out, we'll look at a property and they'll say, well, look over there. And then you turn around and you look at their house and you see a whole, you see a number of ways that their structure could burn down. So I just want you to be aware of that. We will follow up on any complaints. As far as that, I'm not going to speak to that specific tree in that case. But as soon as a tree grows over onto your property and it's your neighbor's, it becomes your responsibility to maintain that tree. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of that, but please, if you have a specific property address, come to us. If you want us to look at it, we will, but we will kind of be looking at the neighborhood when we come out.
Thank you. The next ones I'm gonna kind of cobble together because I think we can hit them rapid fire. Can there be, under the current draft of Zone 0, if we continue with that same language, would potted plants in the Zone 0, 0 to 5 feet be allowed, potted plants, and if so, what kind? Back to the jacaranda tree, will specific kind of species of plants be enumerated that are desirable, less desirable, allowed, not allowed? What do they do with this jacaranda? And then lastly, is lawn up against the house, flush of the house, grass, not considered safe? These are the kind of tactical questions people are wondering what they're gonna have to do if the current set of Zone 0 regulations are codified.
I'll start. So trees are allowed, and you have all permitted. You have a tree that is within 5 feet of your house, and it's just all we ask is to trim it up, away from the roof, away from the side of the house. One thing, as I'm an engineer, my daughter, by the way, is at aerospace engineering, but she left her aerospace work to follow her passion, so.
There's hope for all of us.
There's hope for all of us. So as an engineer I had a jacaranda tree in my property. My property is right against the Angeles National Forest in Altadena. Home survived this past fire and survived the station fire. But the jacaranda tree was actually damaged in my foundation. So just consider that you're gonna have trees that close to your home. Consider there might be some other damage in there. The regulation does provide the ability to trim the trees, push them away a little bit, and then you mentioned something else. Potted plants. Potted plants are allowed. We just don't want in front of the window or in front of the vents. You saw that example that Yana showed up, that plant got embers inside in there. So 5-gallon, non-compostable material, maybe not really tall because you don't want it to go into your eaves, and not in front of potted plants are allowed.
With restriction. They are size, distance?
Yes, I did say, okay, sorry, non-compostable pot, the 5 gallons in size, and then, the plant usually will stay there, and then the height, all we mentioned is height 18 inches.
And distance between?
And the distance between plants, but also we're talking about, if you have a few plants next to each other, meanwhile, not in front of the vents, not in front of the windows.
Okay, the next question.
So Jeff, I just want to
Yeah,
add to
please.
that, sorry, actually, the draft regulation says not in front of windows or glass patio doors.
Right.
So, I mean, if we're gonna talk specifics, we ought to talk real specifics. And I'm very sensitive to this because I'm super fond of my potted plants, and I have glass doors all around my house. It's 63 years old. I didn't build it that way. I think that a lot of people get enormous enjoyment out of having plants that are visible to them from inside their house. And the houses are constructed in ways, we have an enormous number of homes in the Conejo Valley that have courtyards with windows and doors looking onto the courtyards. This is the way houses were built here in decades past. And denuding those areas is just no small thing. And if we're gonna go down that route, I think it is going to diminish the public's willingness to cooperate with these laws, and it's gonna require a lot of home inspections. And people are just gonna be moving their potted plants around. And I think we have to think about the cost of enforcement and the degrading of respect for the fire department, who becomes the potted plant police. I think we should be talking about what that does to our relationships, and not just saying, don't worry about it, it's just a couple of potted plants, and so long as they aren't too big. This kind of, I'm gonna call it minutia, is gonna blow up on everyone who is responsible for the enforcement and inspection of properties in the Conejo Valley.
Thank you, Dr. Conley. The number one concern that's brought to my office when our phones ring and the emails pop up is how long do people have to comply? Once the code is codified, once Zone 0 is finalized, how long do people have to comply? And what are there any considerations being given right now to folks, like say on a fixed income, who just don't have the discretionary funds to remodel, to re-landscape, to do those kind of things? What kind of dialogue is going on with the Board of Forestry or otherwise that might help folks understand how long they have to comply, if there's any resources to help them comply, and then lastly, if they ultimately can't, what is expected in terms of enforcement on them? That'd be, any kind of feedback would be great.
Yeah, so the current draft does have a section in there that says, well, first of all, it's gonna be 3 years after new construction, so after the regulation is adopted, it's new construction immediately, and after that, 3 years after, it'll be for existing homes. Also the regulation says that you can have, the local authority having your direction can work with the property owner when there's limitations of money or challenges, logistics challenges. Remember, this is statewide, so we have some places in Siskiyou County, there might be a home in a very remote area, with difficult to get work out there, so find ways to work it out with the property owner, depending on their income or their economic situation or the challenges they might have. But those provide provisions for that.
And if I could just add to that, for new construction, our community, our county is not really gonna see a change. We've had it in place since 2019. I don't think that's anyone's concern. When you're building something new, it's a lot different than when it's existing. We know that. I think right now, the way the law is written is once the regulations are released, then the State Board of Forestry has to develop guidelines. Once those guidelines are developed, it's immediately applicable statewide in new construction. And then within 3 years from that date, what we don't know right now is how long it's gonna take for those guidelines to be developed once the regulations are released, probably in the next 3 months. But before we issue one notice in this county, one is we haven't figured it all out in the fire department. We have a lot of thinking to do. We're just kind of trying to wrap our heads around this. But it's very important to us to educate our county for the next 3 years. That is our primary focus, is to educate our county. And the last thing we wanna do is issue a notice to someone and they've never heard what Zone 0 is. So that's gonna be our focus initially.
Thank you, Chief. A question I have, and we've heard just tonight some different perspectives on the science around Zone 0, first 5, vegetation, hydration. How's the board, the panel, the Board of Forestry in evaluating what science and what scientists to listen to? Is there a process? Is there a process, or is there a cadre of folks that are providing input? Is there any kind of peer evaluation, scientific peer evaluation? Just a number of the questions around the science, and if you have multiple perspectives, in the end, which one do you find you want to choose, or?
It's not only one. So one of the first one is National Institute of Standards and Technology. Is technical note 2205. Is one of the big documents in there. The National Institute of Standards and Technology has spent quite a bit of years of working in geometry of the different items around the home, and how they work together to either disrupt the path of fire into a structure or increase that. So sometimes good intentions take us back. So you have a little wooden shed that is a little 120 square foot wooden shed that doesn't require a permit. You don't want it right next to your house, but you put it in the back, right next to your neighbor's house. So, so little things like that, that's why they look into that. But also includes vegetation, includes trash cans and all those items. So technical note 2205, highly recommended. It's about 758 pages. But wait, no, it's not that big. But it's our main document that we use. On top of that, CAL FIRE has done quite a bit of experiments, and then also some of the experiments that the IVHS has done also help us make that decision. At the same time, some of the work that has been done by University of California and the building standards. When we test in the building standards, get tested on how they're gonna perform. So now we notice that 16 of an inch, 8 of an inch work better than quarter of an inch in your mesh. But also you have the assessment done around the home. So one side of your home might be exposed to not only embers, but to flame. So the materials that you use are tested for flame and ember resistance. Another part of your home may not be needed for that. So I'll give you my home. I have a home that is about 30 feet or less than 30 feet. I have a house on one side and the other one about 50 feet from the other side. On those two sides, I have done defensible space and home hardening to withstand flame and embers. In the front, I have about 50 feet to the street, and in the back, I have a canyon in Los Angeles National Forest. So for that, I plan for embers. So that's what we use to specifically see what will be the best methods. I do have to say, Zone Zero is just a small part of what it is, and that's what we're mandated to do. Love that we're talking about home hardening, it should be part of it, but it's not in the statute that we follow. So it's just a little part. My brother works for Ford Motor Company, and he gets projects. So one of them is to design the brakes of the F-150 truck. Well, he doesn't work on the whole truck, he works on the brakes. He connects to the other ones because you gotta see how much weight, how heavy it's gonna be and all that. So think about it that way. This is just that small little part of that. And going to Greg's point, he's from the house out. Dr. Cypher and John Kelly, good friends of mine, said that 66 feet is a good thing, but it's from the house out. If Zone Zero is the first 5 feet from the house out. My hillside was modified a long time ago, over 100 feet to reduce that fire hazard. I'm claiming it back with native plants right now because it's good to maintain that soil in place. It's a hillside. So all those items get considered. It's not just one single study. All those get considered for our decisions.
Thank you. Another thematic question. I've got a number of them to repeat. And we're going to just take one more after this. My commitment to everyone here is if you submitted a question, we will identify an answer for it from the subject matter experts or otherwise and get an answer back to you. We're going to try to post them on our website at the Ventura County Board of Supervisors, District 2, my website. So we will get your questions answered if we don't do it tonight. The thematic question here is, does the Board of Forestry, in coming to these conclusions around Zone Zero, basically structure hardening, looking at it in a silo alone, or are there other broader considerations being considered, like undergrounding power lines, giving greater assets for firefighter, forward staging, water, better electricity distribution, maybe resources to the local fire safe councils. those kind of things that would be value added on top of structured defense.
Well, as I mentioned a moment ago, we're just doing the breaks in here. However, AB9 created the Wildfire Mitigation Advisory Committee, which has Board of Forestry, has different groups in there. It's about 15 of us that are working in this world, has power, people, and we all working in the solution together. So those meetings happen every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Leave the information, you can attend them, and we discuss all these other areas that bring everything together to have a better management of this fire. We're just doing that little part in this, in with Sun Zero, but in those meetings are very good. It's only last 2 hours, every second Tuesday of the month, 1 p.m. I'll pass the information to you.
Thank you. I'm gonna consider this the last question, and then, like I said, we're gonna try to answer them all afterwards and get your information back. There's also a hearing tomorrow night in Altadena, and then there's a website that probably will.
It's Pasadena.
Pasadena, not
10:50
Altadena.
a.m., Pasadena Convention Center.
Thank you.
So, sorry, it had to be, we changed it for 2 reasons. One, weather, second of all, the attendance increased, so we went to a bigger venue, so we were gonna go to the Rose Bowl, but it was too big. So we're gonna do the Pasadena Convention Center at 10:30.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarification. The last question, and I've heard this before too. In fact, the Board of Supervisors asked it of the fire chief for these maps. Can a property owner appeal the designation in the map, the high-risk designation of the property? This particular question comes from somebody who lives in a tract home, not on a ridge or a hillside, but the back fence borders a property with a very high-risk designation, so that they are now in a high-risk designation. Everyone else on the street is moderate, and in April 2024, State Farm Insurance Company sent them a letter stating that they were low risk. So they're wondering what appeal process there may be related to their juxtaposition on the map designations.
So there is not an appeal process. This is the CAL FIRE maps that were rolled out back in March statewide. There was a lot of conflict behind them because the state really didn't have an appeal process. Even the fire department, local agencies, cities, there's not an appeal process. So the maps that were developed and implemented statewide, there is not currently an appeal process. You can reach out to CAL FIRE if you want to, provide your input on that, but that's currently as it is, as it stands right now.
Well, everyone here tonight, thank you for being here. Everyone tuning in from home, thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Jay in particular, for everyone who drove up and spent time sharing this with us. I'll hang around for a little while. If any of our panelists are able to stay, I'm sure they will if they have to get home. I also understand that as well. We'll get the rest of these questions answered, and I just want to thank everybody. Have a great rest of your night. Drive home safely.